Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Moo's World. If you are new, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for being a subscriber. I have reached 1,000 subs since I think a few months back, so thank you guys so much for whoever has been supporting and subscribing. Who watches these videos, I don't know, but thank you for watching. Today we are just going to be talking about what my experience was like interviewing for the Microsoft new grad and software engineering position. So I'll just pretty much cover my entire experience from actually applying to the role, and then also I'll talk about what it was like communicating with a recruiter, preparing for the interview, and then I'll also dive into what exactly the interview questions were. I don't recall signing an NDA or anything like that. The recruiters never told me that I couldn't speak with anyone about what I was asked, so I'm gonna share with you guys exactly the questions that I was asked. I won't go into the solutions that I tried to implement because I don't even want to think back to that day. It was just so stressful. I've kind of blocked it out of my mind, so I'm pretty much just gonna relive like those stressful 9 hours just for today, so I can give you guys that experience and hopefully help anyone who's also looking to apply to that same role or a similar role. So I received an invitation to come in actually for the first round interview, and I actually missed that email, so I didn't see it like until like 2 or 3 weeks since I received it. Since I had received that email, so like when I saw it in my inbox, I was like, oh my god, like let me reach out to the recruiter. I hope that they're still taking interviews. So I reached out and I was able to actually come into like one of the last few days that they were pre-screening for. So I signed up for one of those slots. I was able to participate in my first round interview then about 2 weeks after. So I was able to secure a time slot for I think it was August 24th for half an hour, and I was gonna do a virtual technical interview with whoever. So they sent me a link to that meeting, and then on August 24th I logged in online. I spoke with the software engineer who was it an Indian female? I think it, oh yes, actually yeah, it was an Indian lady. She was kind of young. I think she had graduated maybe like 3 years ago, and she was a back-end software engineer. So she just asked me about like, hey, okay, where are you from? Like, what are you about? Why are you here? What are you looking for? She asked me like 2 or 3 behavioral questions, like, okay, how did you respond when you dealt with a difficult group member? How did you deal with conflict? How did you deal with setting goals, deadlines, meeting timelines, and stuff like that? So just very, you know, surface level, typical behavioral questions. And then like 5 minutes or like 10 minutes into the interview, of course, because they only spend like a fraction of the time on behavioral questions, then she asked me, okay, how can you reverse a linked list? If I were to give you this list, how could you reverse it? And so we went through how to solve that. I gave her my solution, and then I had some like mistakes in how I was writing the code, but I was just like typing it in the console, and I wasn't gonna compile it and run it. So like I just talked her through my thinking, through my steps and my solution, and then after I came up with the working solution, I went through the test cases, I ran through them, and then I said, okay, I think this would be linear runtime because of this, and it's using constant space and all that. So boom, I wrapped that interview up. I asked her a few questions about herself, what she does on her team, what her favorite project has been while she was at Microsoft, and then boom, I logged off, and that was a half an hour interview. So that interview was scheduled to be half an hour, and she was like in the beginning of the interview, she said that she was gonna ask me 2 to 3 questions. I was like, 2 to 3 coding questions? Okay, but anyways, like as we got into the first question, I think I spent like 15 minutes actually talking about how I would implement it, just because like I wanted to really understand how I was going to solve the problem before I tried coding it. So that's what I did. And then after that interview, I heard back, I think the middle of the following week, that I was going to be moving on to final rounds. So then I got another link to schedule my final round interviews, and I scheduled it I think it was, so this was the end of August. I had scheduled my interview for September 17th. So about 2 or so weeks from that date. And after I had scheduled that, I went and I bought the premium membership off of LeetCode, and I practiced a bunch of the cards from the Microsoft interview question section. And then I also made sure to practice like most of the easy LeetCode interview questions, and then also the medium LeetCode interview questions. I covered YouTube for pretty much every single topic, like dynamic programming, understanding breadth first search and depth first search, recursion, binary trees, binary search trees. What else? I spent a lot of time on dynamic programming because that was tough for me to understand. I didn't really look into sorting algorithms that much, or graph traversals, which I should have, but I didn't really look into those that much. I just spent a lot of time focused on like what the questions were in the Microsoft LeetCode premium thing that you can buy, which is like a whole set of questions that are supposed to have been previously asked by the company. So I just practiced off of those questions. So yeah, that's what I did for about 2 weeks. I kind of bunkered down and I just studied. I covered all those topics that I just listed. I also looked at runtimes and space complexity because I knew that I was going to be asked about that. And so boom, September 17th jumps up and now it's time for my interview. So it is, I think it's like 12 p.m. I log into the link that I received to have my first interview. And actually at first at 12:30 they hold like this like info session where the recruiter plays like a video that tells you how to prepare for the interview, which is practically useless because it's a bunch of information that you need like months in advance to actually prepare for the interview. So I don't know why they show you that interview. And then after it's over, she was like, well, I hope you watched it. Maybe you can get some few minutes of study time in. Like, that's not funny. Like, bro, it's not funny. Like, this is about to be like the hardest few hours of our life and you're making jokes. Like, it's not funny. So freaking after that, we only met for about half an hour, and then we got to log off and like mentally decompress. And then I had my first interview at 1 p.m. This interview was with also a back-end recent software engineer at Microsoft. And then this is actually when I realized that they were hiring for the SharePoint OneDrive team, I believe. So I realized that I was at a hiring event, and the event was for hiring engineers for this SharePoint and OneDrive team. So I learned this after I met with my first interviewer, and she, of course, first off asked me those basic surface level behavioral questions. And you know, this is interview 1. So she asked me that, and then she jumps into the technical portion and she's like, okay, I want you to solve, I can't remember the exact wording of the question, but it was like the sum of like the square of like a matrix. And I'll have the actual problem statement right here to show you guys because I can't remember off the top of my head. But this was what she asked me. And honestly, at first when I was talking about my solution, I gave out an answer that really wasn't solving the problem that she first asked me. So I feel like I kind of screwed up in this interview because I was just kind of scared when I saw that the problem was matrix. I was like, okay, it's a matrix, dynamic programming, recursion, breadth first search. So I was just kind of like just kind of a little bit freaked out. And so I think I was just rushing and I didn't really think through the problem, and like she just gave me one example and I tried to solve it based off of that example. But what I should have done is break down that example into a simpler one and then try and solve that. That way I would have been able to see the patterns in the smaller scenario and then apply that to the larger scenario. But I did not do that. So I kind of just talked through the implementation that I would do. I came up with a naive solution. And then after that, I coded it out in the console. I didn't compile it, but you know, we talked through what I was doing, and then she asked me how I could optimize the problem, and I honestly couldn't answer her question. So she was like, okay, well, you can actually just take the sum of all of the rows and then like that way you can check the sum of each like thing without having to actually calculate the sum of every single, I don't even know, but she was just like telling me how it could have been optimized, and I was like, oh, I totally didn't think of that. And so at the end I was like, okay, yeah, well yeah, that's a great idea. You know, that makes total sense. So after she explained to me how she would do it, she was like, all right, so do you have any questions for me? And then I gave her my questions that I had for her. I was like, okay, that interview was not very good, but keep it up, it's all right. You got the next one, you got it. Hopefully it's gonna be behavioral, maybe less stressful, boom. So I log on to my next interview 15 minutes later because my interview ended at 1:45. And then my next interview was at 2 p.m. And this interview was with, I think, a more senior software engineer on the same team. It was an Indian male. The first lady was an Asian female. This guy was very nice. He asked me a lot of behavioral in-depth questions at first, which I really liked. He talked about my group work, he went through my resume and asked me very specific questions about my resume, which I really liked. And then, you know, we spent so much time talking about this, I didn't really think that we would have a technical portion, but of course, they always find time to fit it in. So he asked me the technical question, and he's like, okay, here's a linked list. How could you delete a node? You know, if you needed to. And then, like, given the head of the list, how would you delete the node? Okay, solve that. And then he said, all right, now, not given the head of a node, but given the node itself, how would you change, or how would you delete that node? And I got a little bit stuck, but he kind of talked me through it, and then I figured out, I was like, oh yeah, I got it. And then boom, I had figured out how to solve it, and we talked through how to optimize that. We talked about the runtime. It was constant. So that was a very good interview. I felt like I answered all his questions, and towards the end I asked him really good, insightful questions, and he was smiling a lot as he was taking notes. So I felt really connected with just our conversation. So that was like 100% 5 out of 5, like great job. Okay, boom, 3 o'clock, here comes my next interview. So it's an older Indian guy. He's a principal software engineer, so he's been around for a long ass time, essentially is what that means. Like, he knows everything. So having worked with a principal software engineer at Disney, I knew what kind of person I was working with, and this guy was like a genius. So I was like, this is gonna be tough. So he first asked me you know, a few of those behavioral questions, like essentially not the exact same questions, but like just different versions of the same question. Like, okay, how do you work in group settings? What was your favorite group project? You know, just they all kind of had similar behavioral questions. And then about 10 minutes into it, we get into the technical portion of the interview, and he asks me how to find the longest palindrome in a sequence of characters. Like, how do you find the longest palindrome in an array of characters? So that's what I had to do, and I talked through how I would solve it. Of course, the brute force naive way, which is checking every single pair. And I got a little stuck on this part. He kind of really had to coach me through how, like, after you can solve it the brute force way, how do you optimize solving it? And I think there was a way of using like 2 pointers that we ended up deriving, actually, like using 2 pointers to like minimize the number of steps of checking that you have to do. And then that's what we ended up discussing towards the end, and we talked about the runtime. And yeah, that was it. He was pretty flat, kind of dry, didn't smile very much, but you know, he was helpful when I got stuck. So anyways, boom, now it's 4 o'clock. Here's my last interview, and it's with the engineering manager. It's a white male. He was very like just very like he didn't move very much, like not a lot of facial expressions, just very like straight. You know, we got into talking about a lot of behavioral questions. I kind of like took a deep breath because I was like, okay, I can finally talk about behavioral aspects of myself. But of course, after 20 minutes of talking about the behavioral aspects, then he gets into the technical portion, and he asks me about graphs. And he says, okay, you're given a I think you're given 2 nodes and you have to try and determine like how many neighbors they are away from each other. So obviously I think it's a depth first search traversal problem, and I had literally the skeleton of the standard depth first search algorithm written in my notebook, but I just could not recall how to implement that to this problem. It was like 4:30, our meeting was supposed to end at 4:45, and I was like, okay, we're not gonna have much time to discuss this anyways, so like I don't have to come up with a solution. Let me just go with what I first think of so that I'm not like, so I don't look stupid. So essentially, I don't know if this makes sense to you guys, but I kind of just wanted to say like the first thing that came to my mind, but I really should have taken that time to think through how to solve that problem, and I feel like that definitely would have gotten me the job, but I was just stuck on how to traverse the node of like, I don't know, I just felt like, again, like I choked, and I felt like I should have practiced more graph problems. But honestly, I didn't practice one graph. Like I watched graph problem and traversal videos, but I think I was just scared of those problems, so I didn't do that many on LeetCode, and I wasn't 100% comfortable with them. And I feel like honestly this video is kind of therapy, because I'm exposing things that I feel like I did that I know kind of up my chances of getting the job. One of them is obviously not covering graphs and not actually you know, feeling comfortable solving them. So yeah, so anyways, obviously, as you guys can tell by how I'm talking about it, I did not get the position, and I found out on Monday. I got an email saying we're not moving forward. This interview was definitely a huge learning lesson, and now I feel like moving forward into my next interview, because I do have some coming up with other companies, I know that I'm going to focus on graphs. I'm going to focus on depth first search, breadth first search, recursion, and dynamic programming. I feel like I have a handle on arrays and strings, but I mean, even like that longest palindrome sequence problem, I feel like even like that, I could have just, if I had just solved it on my own on LeetCode, which I know it's on LeetCode, I probably would have just been fine. So honestly guys, top #1 tip is just LeetCode, okay? Practice, do every single medium question, do every single hard question, do every single question in the card stack for the company that you're applying for, and I would say 8 out of 10 chance that you get the job without doing anything else, and just being able to solve those problems, you'll be fine. Because if I had solved every single one of those problems, I would have been fine, but I didn't solve every one. I solved like most of the linked list problems, most of the array problems, most of the string problems, most of the binary tree problems, but I didn't solve a lot of the graph problems, and I feel like that's kind of where I myself over. So, you know, I hope you guys learned from my experience. Obviously, you know, I should have made better decisions. I should have studied harder. I should have done mock interviews to prepare. But now I feel like I know what is expected of me moving forward. So I hope this video was helpful to anyone that's watching. So yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Yeah, stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.